If a woman takes your P3N1s in her mouth, it means let's be real. If a woman chooses to take your P3N1s in her mouth, it doesn't just mean one thing. It's not a blanket statement. It's a layered, complex act that can carry different meanings depending on her, you, and the context. White heavy check mark, it could mean she desires you deeply and trusts you enough to explore the most intimate parts of herself and of you. White heavy check mark, it could mean she's curious, adventurous, and wants to give and receive pleasure without judgment. White heavy check mark, it could mean she's doing something for you because she feels she has to. And if that's the case, you need to pause and question why she feels that way. But let's be clear about what it does not mean. Prohibited, it does not mean she's your property now. Prohibited, it does not mean she owes you more or that you can take more than she's willing to give. Prohibited, it does not mean you can attach her worth as a woman to that act. Here's the truth. Oral sex is an act of vulnerability and power at the same time. If she chooses to give, it's a gift, not a contract. Don't assign your own ego-fueled narrative to her body. Respect her choice, respect her boundaries, and respect yourself enough to understand that sex, of any kind, only has meaning if both people choose it freely with joy and with clarity. When a woman takes your P3N1s in her mouth, you need to understand that context shapes everything about that act. It's not one size fits all. It's not some universal signpost of love, lust, submission, or dominance. It's layered, and those layers come from who she is, where her head is at, and what the dynamic between the two of you really looks like. For some women, this act is a pure expression of desire. It's her way of saying, I crave you, I want to taste you, I want to explore you. It's intimate. It's intentional. In that moment, her decision might reflect the heat of passion or a deeper emotional connection where she feels safe and trusting enough to share that level of intimacy with you. In that scenario, there's no confusion. She's in control of her choice, and it's driven by her own pleasure as much as yours. For others, it could be a gesture of curiosity or playfulness. Maybe she doesn't attach deep emotional meaning to it. Maybe she's adventurous and sees oral sex as a fun, mutually pleasurable act, something to be shared without overanalyzing it or wrapping it in layers of guilt and expectation. And that's her right too. Not every sexual act has to carry a soul-binding narrative behind it. If both partners feel aligned, that's healthy sexual expression. But here's where the nuance kicks in. Sometimes a woman does it not because she wants to, but because she thinks she has to. She thinks it's expected of her. She's doing it to keep the peace, to avoid conflict, or because she's been conditioned to believe this is part of being a good partner. That is a completely different situation, and if you don't have the self-awareness to recognize that energy, you're not ready to be intimate on this level. What you have to get into your head is that her putting your P3N1s in her mouth doesn't automatically mean you're special. It doesn't mean she's deeply in love with you. It doesn't mean she's the freak your ego wants her to be. And it doesn't mean she's okay with whatever comes next. It's an act, and the meaning behind it is fluid. It changes depending on her mood, her feelings, her trust in you, and her reasons for choosing to engage in the first place. If you don't take the time to understand the context, you'll misread her completely. And that's how men end up crossing boundaries, losing respect, or mistaking momentary passion for permanent devotion. So stop assigning your own fantasies or assumptions to what she's doing. Pay attention to her energy before, during, and after. Is she engaged, present, and enthusiastic, or is she detached and just going through the motions? Context is the difference between mutual pleasure and miscommunication, between intimacy and entitlement. It's your responsibility to read the room, not just her body, and to ask yourself whether the act is coming from a place of freedom or a place of obligation. That's the level of awareness real men bring to the table. If a woman puts your P3N1s in her mouth, that act does not give you ownership, not of her body, not of her time, not of her heart, and definitely not of her future decisions. We live in a world where too many men still carry outdated, ego-driven beliefs that physical access equals control, that once she gives you her body, she somehow belongs to you. That mindset isn't just toxic, it's lazy, entitled, and completely disconnected from what it means to be in a conscious, consensual, adult relationship. Let's be clear, no sexual act grants you permission to label, define, or dictate who she is or what she does after that moment. You don't own a woman because she was naked with you. You don't deserve her loyalty just because she went down on you. If she gave you that moment, it was a gift, not a down payment. And you don't get to act like the world owes you more just because she let her guard down and shared something intimate with you. That energy of "I touched you so now I control you" is rooted in insecurity and domination, not love, respect, or partnership. There's a twisted logic some people carry that says once a woman performs a sexual act, especially one as intimate and vulnerable as oral sex, she loses power. But that's projection, because deep down, the ones who think that way are terrified of a woman who's sexually autonomous. They fear the woman who takes pleasure into her own hands, who chooses when, how, and if she shares her body. So they try to flip the script, to make her feel small, used, or ashamed, because it makes them feel bigger. But a real man doesn't do that. A man rooted in self, worth, and clarity understands that intimacy is about mutual access, not ownership. The other side of this problem is entitlement. Some guys think that once a woman's gone that far, she can't say no to anything else. That if she did that, she must want everything. No, consent isn't a one-time blanket, it's ongoing. If she says yes to one thing and no to another, the only right response is respect. If you can't accept her boundaries after intimacy, then you were never safe to be intimate with in the first place. You also don't get to throw that act back in her face when you're hurt, jealous, or angry. If you later say things like "you did that for me, so you owe me," or weaponize her vulnerability as a way to shame her, that's not just manipulative, it's emotional abuse. And if you brag about it to others, like you scored something she didn't give willingly, you're not a man. You're a boy playing with things you don't understand. At the end of the day, a woman's body is her own, even when she shares it with you. Her pleasure is hers. Her choices are hers. And your job, if you're even lucky enough to be invited in, is not to take ownership but to hold space, to respect what's given, and to never, ever forget that nothing is owed beyond what's freely offered. Mutual respect is not optional. It's the foundation of any sexual encounter worth having. If a woman takes your P3N1S in her mouth, that moment should be grounded in a shared sense of care, trust, and dignity. Too often, people approach intimacy like it's a transaction. One person gives, the other takes, and that's it. But that's not what real connection looks like. Mutual respect means both people are fully present, both are giving and receiving, and neither person is treated like an object or a means to an end. It's about recognizing her humanity in the act, not just focusing on your own pleasure. When respect is present, the energy between you changes. You're not just there to get off. You're paying attention to her body language, her breathing, her comfort level. You're not pushing her head down harder. You're not treating her like a tool for your release. You're in tune with her. You're making sure she feels safe, appreciated, and desired, not used. And she, in turn, should feel empowered to enjoy her side of the experience. Respect doesn't make the act less intense or passionate. It makes it better because it builds trust. And trust is what allows people to let go, to be raw, to be fully present in their own bodies without fear of judgment. Disrespect, on the other hand, destroys everything. If you ignore her cues or act entitled to her body, she's not going to feel free to enjoy herself. If you pressure her, make jokes at her expense, or take her willingness for granted, you're not engaging in intimacy. You're feeding your ego at her cost. And here's the thing, she'll remember how you made her feel. Long after the physical sensations fade, the emotional residue sticks. A woman who feels respected during sex will likely feel closer to you, more trusting, and more open. A woman who feels disrespected will shut down, pull away, and never look at you the same. Respect also means understanding that she doesn't owe you anything, before, during, or after. She doesn't have to finish the act if she doesn't want to. She doesn't have to perform in a way that fits your porn-fueled expectations. She doesn't have to tolerate behavior that crosses her boundaries. And it's your responsibility to check your own mindset and actions to make sure you're not crossing those lines, even unintentionally. Ask questions if you're unsure. Communicate. Make space for her to say no as easily as she can say yes. The irony is that when both people respect each other deeply, the intimacy becomes more powerful. She's not just doing something for you, she's with you in it. You're sharing something electric, something that feels alive because both of you chose it freely. Mutual respect turns an ordinary act into an extraordinary connection. Without it, you're just two bodies colliding, and that's not intimacy, that's emptiness. Power dynamics are present in every intimate encounter, whether people recognize them or not. If a woman takes your P3N1S in her mouth, you need to step back and ask yourself, is this truly her choice, or does she feel pressured to do it? Does she feel free to stop at any moment, or is there an unspoken expectation hanging over her? The answers to those questions matter more than anything else because they determine whether the experience is mutual and empowering or imbalanced and harmful. Too many men operate without considering how power can creep into sex. Maybe she's younger than you. Maybe she's in a vulnerable emotional place. Maybe she's afraid of losing you, so she agrees to things she isn't fully comfortable with. Or maybe she doesn't even realize she has the right to say no because society has conditioned her to think pleasing a man is part of her role. That's not real consent. That's a performance born out of fear, obligation, or manipulation. And if you're not aware enough to recognize that, you're not in a position to handle intimacy responsibly. A healthy sexual connection requires balance. Both people need to have equal power to express what they want, what they don't want, and to change their mind at any moment. If she's doing something only because she feels like she owes it to you, that's not mutual, it's transactional. And if you sense even a flicker of hesitation in her, but choose to ignore it because your desire overrides her comfort, you're stepping into dangerous territory. That's not passion, that's coercion wrapped in ego. It's not always about direct force either. Power imbalances can be subtle. They can show up in the way you speak to her, in the jokes you make about what good girlfriends do, in the sigh you let out when she hesitates, in the way you avoid her eyes while pushing her head lower. These moments might seem small to you, but they can weigh heavy on her and make her feel like her comfort doesn't matter. That is the opposite of intimacy. If you truly care about her and about yourself, you will create space for her to feel safe. You will let her know with your words, your tone, your body language, that she's in control of what happens to her body. You'll remind her she can stop whenever she wants and that your connection doesn't depend on what she does sexually. That's how you dismantle unhealthy power dynamics and replace them with trust. When the power dynamic is equal, oral sex, or any sexual act, becomes something far greater. It becomes a shared exploration, not a test of her loyalty or a performance for your ego. It becomes a place where both people can fully show up without fear, without pressure, and without imbalance. And that's when sex moves from being an act to being an experience. Pleasure and trust are deeply connected, and this is especially true when it comes to acts as intimate and vulnerable as oral sex. If a woman takes your P3N1S in her mouth, it's not just about physical sensation, it's about the emotional space between the two of you. That space determines whether the experience feels empowering and electric or hollow and mechanical. Without trust, pleasure can't fully unfold. Without pleasure, trust can feel wasted. The two feed each other, and together they create the kind of intimacy that lingers long after the act itself is over. Think about what it means for someone to willingly bring that level of vulnerability into a moment. She's putting herself in a position where she's physically exposed, emotionally open, and often navigating societal baggage about what this act says about her as a woman. For her to let go, she has to trust that you won't judge her, that you won't use the moment to degrade or devalue her, and that her boundaries will still matter even in the heat of passion. That trust is not automatic. It's built through your actions, your words, and the way you treat her outside the bedroom. Pleasure doesn't flourish in a space where she feels unsafe or unappreciated. If she's performing the act just to satisfy you, with no regard for her own enjoyment or comfort, it's not intimacy, it's obligation. And that energy will kill the connection. A woman who feels she has to do something is not the same as a woman who wants to do something. The difference is trust. Trust lets her lean in fully, unguarded. Trust allows her to focus on her desire, on her curiosity, on the moment itself instead of worrying about what you'll think of her afterward or whether you'll hold this act over her head. You also have to understand that her pleasure matters just as much as yours, even in an act that's centered on your body. If you're only taking and not giving, the imbalance will be felt. Pleasure is reciprocal, even if the act is not simultaneous. It's about energy. Are you making her feel beautiful, wanted, and safe? Are you noticing her cues, appreciating her effort, and making space for her to stop or shift if she needs to? Or are you treating her like an accessory to your orgasm? One of these builds trust and connection. The other creates distance and resentment. When trust and pleasure come together, the experience transcends mechanics. It's not just about what's happening physically. It's about a shared emotional current running between two people. That's what makes intimacy magnetic and memorable. It's what makes her want to come back to you, not because she feels obligated, but because she feels alive with you. Pleasure is not just about the body. It's about the freedom to explore, to give, and to receive without fear. And that freedom only exists where trust lives.